Welcome to this video presentation about my geographical study of non-smoking lung cancers in England, which I put together in the Easter weekend of 2024. This presentation is intended to be shared with a small group of people to gauge their thoughts on this work. Since my model can be a bit complicated to follow, I wanted to prepare this presentation as an aid to understanding what I have done. My name is Shaun Hill. I live in London in the UK. I want to make it very clear from the start that I am not a medical doctor or a scientist or a medical statistician, and I have no medical qualifications whatsoever, so please view what I have done accordingly. I am an ALK, which means anaplastic lymphoma kinase, lung cancer patient diagnosed in January 2022. ALK is one of several different oncogene-driven lung cancers for which the causes and risk factors are poorly understood. Unlike more common lung cancers, smoking doesn't seem to be a risk factor with these oncogene-driven lung cancers. Most of us within the ALK lung cancer community are either never smokers like myself or had a light smoking history, often many years before. The median age of diagnosis is around 50 and the majority are female. This presentation is really a study of data. I'm an accountant by profession and have a bachelor level physics degree from many years ago, so I'm comfortable with numbers. Not surprisingly, being an ALK positive lung cancer patient, most of the knowledge that I have about lung cancer is about ALK. Bear in mind that there will be more uncertainty when talking about the data for other lung cancers, and especially for other types of cancer. Why am I doing this? Being a lung cancer patient, I am highly motivated to understand the disease that is affecting me and those of us within the community. Fortunately, in the era of TKIs, tyrosine kinase inhibitors, our life expectancy within the ALK community has grown from several months now to several years, and grown further still with developments. However, sadly, a proportion of us will pass away every year, and I just wanted to be able to contribute something that might help the public good. My hope is that in some small way, this might advance understanding of ALK and other non-smoking lung cancers. I couldn't really see that anybody else has ever done this sort of study for ALK, so I thought I'd give it a try. The history of this project really starts in September 2022, about 9 months after I was diagnosed. I went to my first UK ALK conference. Around that time, there had been some publicity on the mainstream media concerning some research from the Francis Crick Institute Chaser-X project relating to the most common type of oncogene-driven lung cancer called EGFR, epidermal growth factor receptor. I'll just pull that up here, and that's really what it was that came out initially at the time. My own oncologist gave a talk about the research at the UK ALK conference. My simplistic understanding of the research is that many people accumulate a variety of different mutations within their lung tissue over the course of their lives, and that if PM2.5, that's particulate matter of size 2.5 microns or lower, interacts with that mutated tissue, then it can cause a cascade of further mutations that result in EGFR lung cancer. The research had demonstrated in the cities studied that there were more cases of EGFR in areas of higher PM2.5. The obvious question from that was whether the same applied to other non-smoking lung cancers such as ALK. Fast forward to 2023 and I had become involved with the UK charity. There had been some discussions for a while concerning the size of the UK ALK community. The estimate that I believe had been given by a scientist was that there were around 2,000 new cases per year in the UK, presumably coming from the established scientific percentage of ALK being about 5% of all non-small cell lung cancers. Given that the median survival in the era of TKIs is something like 4 to 7 years, that implied a UK population of around 8,000 to 14,000. The trouble was that this didn't really seem to fit with our anecdotal experience. The UK Facebook group had only ever been getting around 100 new patients per year joining, despite having quite a good website at the top of the UK search engine rankings. I appreciate that most people with lung cancer won't want to join a Facebook group reminding them about their cancer, but it just seemed implausible that only 5% of a group of mostly middle-aged patients would be motivated enough to join the group. When I was first diagnosed with lung cancer, I had also joined the Guy's Hospital support group for oncogene-driven lung cancers. I always found it puzzling that there were hardly ever any new faces in the first year, particularly if the 2000 number was correct. There ought to have been about 8 new ALK cases in my London borough of Southwark, with a similar number in Lambeth, a similar number in Lewisham, and so on. There should also have been 3 times as many new EGFR cases in those boroughs per year, plus a few ROS1s and others during the year. The real breakthrough came in March 2023 when a pharma company advised us that of the existence of the publicly available NHS secondary care medicines data going back to 2019, which ought to allow us to make some sort of estimate of the UK ALK population. Within a week or two, a colleague within the charity had written a script using that data to estimate the monthly size of the UK population based on the ALK drugs prescribed by the various hospital trusts, suggesting that the size by late 2022 was probably in the region of 1,000 to 2,000. I had always been interested in any geographical patterns following the findings of the TracerX project for EGFR in April 2023. I started thinking about how I might achieve that, and the month after started building my own spreadsheet-based model to establish an estimate of the number of patients being treated at each hospital trust for EGFR, ALK and ROS1, adjusting for the population in certain geographical areas and then making an estimate of the prevalence per million population in those areas. By July, I had version 1 of my model, which has been evolving and updated ever since to the current version 5. Limitations. As one might expect, there are considerable limitations in the work that I have done. Probably the main limitation is that I've never been able to know what causes the patterns that I observe, whether they be environmental, genetic, or for any other reason. I do not know how many people move around over time, or indeed how long before symptomatic disease the first mutated cancer cell occurs. Where there are correlations with factors such as PM2.5 levels, I don't know whether that it's coincidental or whether there is something more to it. Others more qualified will have to answer such questions. Another important limitation is that I have absolutely no idea where patients live. All I know is that how many drugs each hospital is prescribing at a particular time. Many patients will live, say, within 25 miles of their hospital. However, the more specialist the hospital becomes, the further patients that are prepared to travel. Some people will travel considerable distances to be treated at places like the Royal Marsden or the Christie, especially if there is a new drug being prescribed at a limited number of specialist centres. Whilst the model will produce very precise numbers for things like population sizes, no such precision should be implied, since the model is just generating a number based upon the input criteria fed into it. If the inputs change, then the numbers change. However, the model is intended to give a broad ballpark indication based upon the input data. Whilst I spent a great deal of time and effort in my spreadsheet model, the solution that I have adopted is not particularly sophisticated. It involved inputting probably thousands of numbers into my spreadsheet, no doubt with some errors. The mapping solution is not as good as I would have liked. Perhaps what I've done is to some extent a proof of concept of what can be done with the secondary care medicines data rather than a polished finished product. As I've mentioned earlier, I am not a doctor or a scientist. I'm a patient who has tried to educate myself the best I can over the past couple of years. I don't know to what extent my work is scientifically valid. I've tried to keep an open mind, but it is possible that I'm just reading too much into the patterns that I comment on. Consequently, please treat what I have done with some healthy skepticism. If what I'm saying sounds wrong, then it's quite possibly because it is wrong. I will try to correct errors and inaccuracies in future models. Acknowledgements. I think it's appropriate to give acknowledgements to two people who in different ways have improved the report and, like me, are both ALK patients. I won't name them, but they will know who they are. The first I have mentioned earlier in this introduction. He built his own model of the ALK numbers in England using the same data from the NHS secondary care medicines data, using a different methodology to mine. In March 2023, he managed to calculate from the data the first estimate of ALK patient numbers that seemed to be consistent with our lived experience. We have since shared what we have learned from our respective models, and he first made me aware of what I call the Clatterbridge anomaly, which I will discuss in a different section. We also collaborated in obtaining data from the Cancer Drugs Fund. The second person is a scientist who reviewed version 1 of my model back in July. She didn't have the benefit of the sort of presentation that I'm doing here and had to spend a considerable amount of time trawling through my work to try to understand it. She provided a very detailed feedback, some of which I've implemented in this version 5 and other parts which I still need to work on. However, just to be clear, the model is mine and all errors and misunderstandings are mine alone. To conclude, there are a few issues that I do not really understand at this time, which I will try to make clear when they occur. There are also issues from the data that contradict my expectation.